Hi, Michael Weber here, Artistic Director of Chicago's Porchlight Music Theater, where as part of our new works development program, Off the Porch, we're in rehearsal with a new solo bio-musical, Shake It Away, the Ann Miller story. As an exploration of the unique art of solo performance, we've invited three of the most prominent practitioners of the form to join us in a roundtable discussion of their experience exploring the artistry of Ethel Merman, Groucho Marx, and Elizabeth Taylor. Klea Blackhurst is an actress, singer, and comedian known for her award-winning tribute to Ethel Merman, Everything the Traffic Will Allow. Recently, she appeared off-Broadway with Haley Mills in the comedy Party Face. And among many credits, she starred as Rose in Gypsy and as the title role in Hazel during its world premiere production, both at the Drury Lane Theater, as well as playing Dolly Levi in the 50th anniversary production of Hello, Dolly at the Goodspeed Opera House, and appearing in The Nutty Professor, directed by the legendary Jerry Lewis. Frank Ferrante was discovered by Groucho Marx's son, playwright Arthur Marx, when Ferrante was a 22-year-old drama student performing An Evening with Groucho. Arthur subsequently cast Frank to portray his father in the 1986 Off-Broadway production of Groucho, A Life in Review. Maury Riskind, who co-wrote the Marx Brothers film classics Animal Crackers and A Night at the Opera and attended Ferrante's performance, said, quote, "Frank is the only actor, aside from Groucho, who delivered my lines as they were intended," unquote. Kayla Boye is a Chicago-based artist and creator of Call Me Elizabeth, a one-woman show about the life of Elizabeth Taylor. The production premiered as a film during the pandemic via Broadway On Demand, later premiering live in the 2022 Hollywood Fringe Festival. Call Me Elizabeth continues to tour following its sold-out off-Broadway engagement and critically acclaimed international runs. And Kayla is now in rehearsal with her newest solo production, Shake It Away, the Ann Miller story. Also, we have some of your fans and Porchlight's Encore members who are going to be joining in the discussion. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So here's where I want to start. The three of you are accomplished actors in your own right, but the idea of doing a show about somebody, about Groucho, about Ethel Merman, Elizabeth Taylor, this seems to me that it sort of chose you. At what point did you go, I'm identifying with this person and I feel I can embody them and present their life on stage? That doesn't happen to every actor. Klea, when did the connection with Ethel Merman start?
Well, I always had, like a lot of people, I find their parents had these record collections, and so your education kind of grew up around whatever your parents' record collection was. And my mother was a musical theater actress in Salt Lake City at a very high amateur level, I would say. And so her record collection, Annie Get Your Gun was my favorite of the records in that collection as a little kid. Now, my mother has that same kind of belting voice, and Ethel Merman has that kind of voice. And so the idea of a soprano or a different sound doesn't even occur to me until I'm like a preteen or like 10 years old. Maybe I hear my first soprano. So my voice just connected. That's like my natural setting vocally. And so I just stayed fascinated with her, and I knew everything about her. And when I was frustrated with my own career professionally, like in the late 90s, I wasn't getting cast as the things I saw myself as or whatever. I wrote like my own, I was just going to write my own act. And I realized I always heard that thing, write what you know. And I knew a lot about Ethel Merman. So I just decided that was going to be my swan song to performing before I left to do whatever else I was going to do. But it really took off. Mostly I found out a lot of the reviews set what people were saying behind my back, which is, this is a terrible idea. It's a party to, it was an invitation. One of the reviews said, I thought this was an invitation to a disaster. Turns out it was an invitation to a party I didn't want to leave. Some variety of that image happened. And if I had known it was such a, bad idea, I never would have done it, but I was kind of oblivious. I was just doing what I knew in that instance. And for people who haven't seen my show or don't know what I do, mine's a little bit different, only in the sense that I lean on the natural belter in myself as and lend itself to Ethel Merman's life. So I don't play her per se, or do an imitation of her. It's more, and not to say imitation, but I don't take take her on except as myself. It really ends up, I think anything ends up being like a version of yourself. You're just using this other person to be the handle that people can pick you up, and see what you're like. So that's how I would say my whole life, but especially around the year 2000, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do a whole show about Ethel Merman, and we'll see what happens. So,
Frank, your experience, I mean, you've been with Groucho now since you were a student, a very young man, but your approach is very different. You literally become him. I've seen you many times, and the audience experience is that we feel we're in the room with him himself. How did it begin, especially as a 22-year-old man?
Well, thanks for saying that, Michael. For me, it started even before. I fell in love with him when I was 9 years old. I saw Day at the Races, a Marx Brothers film, and became exhilarated by it. I was in awe of it, mesmerized. I wanted to be part of that world. Even back then, I was taught. I tell the story. I was taught by nuns. There were a lot of rules, and life was a big, scary thing. And there's something about Groucho's persona that allowed me to be braver. He was armor. He was irreverent, and the shy kid that I was able to certainly wanted to embrace another way of seeing life and living. So so I started imitating him in school sketches and for Halloween, and then it really led into a love of performing arts. Michael, I just went into the local library when I was a boy, and it exposed me not just to the Marx Brothers humor, Groucho, but humor and the theater. And that was the beginning. And it's fun. I was thinking about it before we started this, like, why did I want to do? I had a passion for the subject matter. And we're talking about solo shows. This is the roundtable discussion here. And as you know, I was friends with Hal Holbrook, and he did this wonderful interview on my behalf with the Los Angeles Times. And he said, Frank and I have two things in common. I think all of us in this roundtable discussion do, is that there is a passion for the subject matter and a desperate need to tell the story, to share that passion. It's desperation and passion. And so I felt, it gave me it gave me direction. It got me into the theater and led to beautiful experiences. And it's I forget what the question was, but it was the beginning of a beautiful life for me through his artistry. And it's funny, who is the person, or what is the image, or what is the experience that changes you? That Groucho Marx's genius and artistry changed me, and I wanted to share it with as many people as possible from the time I was 10 years old. I would tell the kids in school, I'd put a list of all the Marx Brothers movies on the chalkboard that were going to be on that week. Duck Soup, 8 o'clock, Channel 5. And because I felt it was important that they know who this person was that changed my life. And I'm still doing that 50 years later. I feel like it's missionary work.
Yeah. It's amazing. Kayla, how about you? Elizabeth Taylor, and again, much like Groucho and Ethel Merman, a long life, and a life that was filled with many different components to it. The early days at MGM, the era of the many husbands, and then arriving at later on with her incredible work with AIDS and her relationships with people like Michael Jackson. What was the attraction to Elizabeth Taylor?
I would say that was it. I mean, the fact that she had such a full life, many lives, you could say, outside of her body of work. She was a person, I think, whose story needed more of a spotlight. People that are in younger generations really, I'm shocked even now, they really only recognize her face or know that she was friends with Michael Jackson or she had perfumes. Like nobody really knows all the things she went through, much like a diamond that was formed under such pressures. And that is what she should be remembered for on top of her work. So for me, I mean, the first part of the show really focuses on the first third of her life, of her origin story. She had already been married several times by the time she did Cleopatra. She turned 30 during Cleopatra, and she was already infamous by that point in her life. So I wanted to explore what happens to a person to make them into an icon. And of all the old Hollywood stars we think of, she was one of the last studio system stars in the MGM universe. So I thought that she bore more exploring. And as far as Ann Miller went, it was kind of the opposite for me. With Elizabeth, I was looking for someone's story to tell that I could authentically tell at that point in my life. But Ann Miller came to me when I think I was 10. I watched That's Entertainment and fell in love right away, seeing her on the back lots of MGM, walking through and showing the studio lot. And then I had the box set of the Tony Awards and the 1980 performance of Sugar Babies. I was like, oh my gosh, the power, the life force coming from this person. That is really what took me, and I felt that. I still feel that connection very much. The reason for being, for performing, for making people happy, that energy has stayed with me my whole life. So I think between the two of them, it was kind of a two sides of the same coin. Elizabeth wanting to tell someone's captivating story, and Anne really feeling that same urge to express and make people happy through entertaining. So yeah, it's a pleasure to try to tell both of their stories in different ways.
And the thing about it, you three have committed to doing what I think is one of the most terrifying things for any actor, and that's getting on a stage alone. Talk about that. What is it to be out there alone? You're in your dressing room alone, except for the stage manager coming in possibly. What's the best part of that? What's the good part of that? Because I think we can all assume what the terrifying part of it is.
I mean, I would say the best part is really calling your own shots in a way. Like you have your own pre-show routine. You have a nice quiet dressing room. It's just you. But that's also time to get in your head and kind of psych yourself out if you feel anxiety for any reason. So I try to put on a playlist of music that is of the world that I'm going to be in. With Elizabeth, it's been a Vegas nightclub set from the 60s, kind of feeling that energy. I haven't decided on what Anne's is going to be yet, probably some big band. Um, but yeah, that is nice to have like kind of autonomy in that regard and having it's just about your energy, but it's also important that you do have energy. You really have to limit your life outside of doing that show that day. It's all about what you can deliver that night or that afternoon. And so I'm really cognizant of going through my pre-show warm-ups, like physically and mentally trying to get focused because one distraction can really throw you off because you don't have a time to escape. You have to be locked in. Frank and Klea, do you have anything to speak to in terms of that, of like locking into the zone for each of these shows?
Well, I like that it's all on my shoulders. I like that I'm not accountable to anyone else or dependent on anyone else on stage except for my accompanist. Yeah, the rituals I love, and this is my 40th year, and I do the same warm ups, for that long, from since then, which is stretching and vocalizing and some yoga like moves, and I picked that up from other actors on the way. So it's part of a tradition. I see it as part of a tradition, and I like being part of this particular tradition of the solo historic figure form. And when I was growing up, I'm digressing a bit here, that was a thing in the 70s and 80s, these type of shows. James Whitmore was doing Give 'Em Hell Harry and Bully, and William Wyndham was doing James Thurber, and Julie Harris was doing Emily Dickinson, and John Aston was doing Edgar Allan Poe. It was a whole form that was out there, and I loved the storytelling. I loved being swept away with these stories, and so part of my back to the process, I loved. It becomes that quiet moment, as those of us who perform know, those moments right before you go on where you just clear the slate, take a breath, and then dive in, jump off the cliff. And it always feels like it even after thousands of performances, like I'm jumping off a cliff every time. And you don't know what's going to be like from show to show. Mine is particularly interactive, so there's that component as well. But even if you don't have I did a one-man show about George S. Kaufman that I wrote, which was not interactive, but extremely challenging and required the same kind of discipline and rituals that come with any work in theater.
In the case of Ethel Merman, like the energy is so high. It's not all music, but most of it is like very high octane singing. It just lends itself like blah, 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 get yourself and we're off, So I view it as a really wonderful time in my life. I very much enjoy. Now, I do other shows about other people. Again, I don't play them per se as like living sort of history lessons in this fun way. Merman is the only one that I feel, maybe it's because I've done it so much since 2001 that I feel it feels joyous to me to step off into it because I really, really know it. I have no stage fright about like, am I going to be able to remember? I find the knowledge that I'm going to eventually launch into a song here pretty quickly gives me the courage to just keep going at a pretty high level. And the older I get, the more impressive that level seems to be. It seems very like, it's like they have to settle back into it just to survive. But it's like, get back to that young level. Let's go. So,
I'm Frank, we know that Maury Riskind, and it is Riskind, or is it Riskind?
Riskind.
It is Riskind. Saw you. He wrote
big deal.
Animal Crackers. He wrote,
Right.
And I know for all three of you, there have been people in your audiences who knew these people, who knew Ethel Merman, who knew Groucho and Elizabeth Taylor. What has been your experience? What has been one that really struck you of somebody who knew them, who was able to connect with you after the show? My God, Frank, you've talked with the children of the Marx Brothers who are watching you embody their artistry, or in Ethel's case, bring her sound to life again.
Right.
What have been some of those encounters for you?
Michael, I have so many stories, as you can imagine, after all these years. And Arthur Marx, Groucho's son, hired me, as you mentioned, to play his dad. And I can tell you a couple. I'll try to keep it quick, but we had done the show, and we tried it out at a dinner theater in Kansas City, and then those owners of the dinner theater in Kansas City wanted to produce in New York, so we played Off-Broadway. We did that for just under a year, and then we went to London, the West End. It was a big deal, and we're rehearsing somewhere in Soho, and I'm doing the number at the very end where Groucho is dying and saying goodbye to life, to his brothers. I'll stay a week or two. I'll stay the summer through. But I am telling you, I must be going. I did that bit, for the, 300-400th time that he's seen it. And afterward, Arthur Marx, who was the playwright and the director of the piece, came out. He was teary-eyed. He goes, Frank, did you know my father? And I thought, well, I was 14 when he knew I didn't know him. But that to me was very moving. And when I first met Miriam, Groucho's daughter, it was after she saw it at USC. I drove to her home in San Clemente, and I'm driving up. I'm 22 years old. I get out of the car, and she goes, Frank, when you walked up, I thought I was seeing my dad. So it was stories like that I can never forget. But there's something that was a spiritual connection. I felt it was meant to be. They were looking for a reconnection, maybe with their father, and maybe I represented that, maybe a much nicer version of their father, or uncomplicated version and a safe version of their dad. I remember being in Arthur's backyard. He had a beautiful home in Bel Air and smoking a cigar, which I don't do a lot, but we said, what the hell? And so we're watching the sunset, And he's in his 80s. And I kept thinking, gosh, I wish he was my age, 33, because I don't want him to go, because we become friends outside of the fact that he was Groucho's son. And we go inside the home, and I leave the cigar outside Michael. I didn't want to bring the smoke into his lovely home. He goes, Frank, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? I said, bring the cigar in. It reminds me of my father. Moments like that. But I've had so many, great things like that. Maury Riskin sent me a letter after that USC performance that Frank Groucho would have been happy and flattered by this performance. And then that same night he said to me, Frank, I hear you're all of 2022. Isn't it time you retired?
And Kayla, when you launched Call Me Elizabeth, the live production of it, it was in Hollywood. So you were right in Elizabeth Taylor's neighborhood. Her people were there.
Yeah, it really didn't hit me. People were telling me, you're very brave to try to do this. And I'm like, I'm just, trying to do a show about a great person. And then it hit me, oh my God, her friends are coming to this. Don't mess it up. We're all doing this with reverence, but she's such an icon. And the pressure has just continued to mount the more I do it, I feel, because I realize more and more every time I do it, somebody knows her that comes. And it's very organic and happenstance. But I'll tell you, it's kind of a personal moment that happened with this. When I first went to do it in Hollywood, I was staying near Forest Lawn, and a friend told me, you should go, just pay your respects because she's right up the street. So I went to her memorial, her gravesite, and laid a lily of the valley down, which was one of her favorite flowers. And I just said, I hope I'm telling your story right. I didn't know what else to say. And I went to where I was staying, and I met the landlord, and he was best friends with her personal physician. And they said, we'll come to your show tomorrow night. I said, okay. So her doctor, Michael Roth, who helped treat Rock Hudson and some of the first AIDS patients, came to my performance, and he said, thank you for doing this. One of the first lines of dialogue you say is exactly what she said to me when I first met her. My name is Elizabeth. Don't call me Liz. And he's like, you named it perfectly. So I'm so glad you did that. And that kind of thing has happened throughout the lifespan of the show. When I did it in Chicago, I had Michael Todd's personal assistant come, and he talked about delivering some luggage from the airport to their apartment and how she waved downstairs from their penthouse at the assistant to thank him when he delivered her suitcases. I had her publicist happen to be living in Mexico where I did it last spring, and that was no pressure either. These people intimately knew the subjects we were trying to portray respectfully. So every time I meet someone, I try to incorporate if they have any anecdotes or tells they were aware of and the mannerisms that I'd like to incorporate. I try my best to take that feedback and continue to improve upon the performance, which is, at the end of the day, trying to get the essence of the person, not necessarily an imitation. But I'm always very appreciative of any feedback or personal stories. That's always welcome, because we're just trying to make their lives be alive again, their essence and their legacies. That's the whole reason of live performance is that connection. So if we can connect to people through what we're doing, that's really the best reward.
And Klea, you're a New Yorker. You're right in Merman's
Listen,
backyard.
I opened this show in 2001, and one little tangent I'll go on is I can now tell the apocryphal stories from real stories. And I've taken the apocryphal stories and I've been able to kind of factor in what I think is actually the genesis of the story and which story that is that I've been told. So I love that. When I first started doing it, this very exotic man who I knew who he was because I'd seen him on the A&E Life of Ethel Merman thing. This guy named Tony Cointreau, who is heir to the Cointreau liquor fortune or whatever, and is sort of almost always speaking on Ethel's behalf. Turns out her son doesn't like to speak in public, and so Tony would kind of do the speaking. Anyway, so he's there decked out in full Versace, and the kind of Versace that you notice, like couture Versace, you can't miss him, And and his husband Jim, who is like in the subtle Versace, the just black on black, not like a blue on yellow. And anyway, he came up to me after, and I was like, oh gosh, he's going to talk to me. He's going to talk to me. And he said, we came with Ethel on our shoulder to hate you. And it turns out we all love you. So thank you. That's wonderful. And then he said, and if you'd like to come visit her, we'd love to have you over. Okay. And what that meant was he had her ashes. And he invited me over. And, this makes me want to call him because I feel we were very close for a number of years. But I haven't spoken to him in quite a long time. But he actually had Ethel, her husband, who she said was the love of her life, Bob Levitt, her daughter. They had all of their ashes in their house in a closet, in a very nice closet. I mean, I don't mean to downplay the closet part, but I went many times to pay my respects. And there was another time he let me sit. He wouldn't let me take anything out of the house or take pictures of anything, but he let me read. The last decade of her life was spent performing with symphony orchestras, just her and these big orchestras. And she would send postcards from everywhere, like, orchestra sounds great, conductor is an ass. There would just be this and I got to sit and just read those one day. I couldn't take any of them or anything like that, but just being kind of allowed into that space with somebody who really knew her, obviously really knew her, was an honor. And I was thrilled that it's like, I found there's been a lot of that. Either we want to hate you, but we love you. You know what it is too, you talking about keeping people's work out there and the legacies. I've done a lot of performing and working with master classes and so on in colleges or high schools with some of the things I do. Well, they don't know who Ethel Merman is often. And I used to get really mad about that, right? I'd be like all ticked off about it. Then I started to go places. They don't know who Gershwin is, Ira or George. And they don't know Gershwin. Means nothing to them. And so there was a subtle shift that happened inside of me that was like, maybe that's why I'm part of why I'm on Earth. I meant to roll all that forward. I stopped. I said, there's no reason these kids would know, right? Cole Porter does not come out of the radio ever. And unless you know how to stream on the channel that's going to have him from time to time, you're never going to hear it. So if keeping that part of somebody, an interview once said to me, okay, so why should people come see you do it? I said, because I'm doing it tonight. I'm alive and I'm doing it. That's really all you need to talk people into coming to see a performance. Well, come give it a chance. I don't care if it interests you. I'm alive. You're an audience member. I do a show. Come see it. Take a chance. Let's do it. And that's been a joy. I too have many, many stories that have come from me. One of my favorites was a man who said he had been in the hospital at Roosevelt Hospital in New York City in the emergency room, and he was on a gurney. And he came to me, he said, I had a vision. I sat up and I saw Ethel Merman. And then he passed back out. And then later he told his friend, I had this vision. Ethel Merman came to me in the emergency room. He said, oh no, she's a candy striper. She volunteers on Thursdays. Like she really was in the emergency room. And he had this beautiful moment of she came to me in a dream or in real life dressed as a candy striper. So just stuff like that, fun things along the way.
That's amazing.
I know. Can you imagine?
Hey, some of our Porchlight friends who are here, Pam or Robin or Donna, did you have a question for Klea or Frank or Kayla about their work and about their work specifically with these shows?
Hi, this is Robin. I'm going to stay off camera for the moment. But no, this has been great. It's so interesting. And you did come around towards the end to talk about, I was thinking, how long are people going to know who these folks are? Because a lot of the tribute shows, they're older performers, and Frank was mentioning the non-musical ones, like the writers, etc. So that's interesting to me, is how do you keep getting audiences as people are not necessarily going to know who the folks were that you're portraying.
If I could speak to that, I'm really encountering that a lot. I would say I'm an emerging solo performer, so I'm kind of in the early stages of my career trying to do this. And so a lot of my colleagues and peers are of the younger audience that really honestly do not know these people. So what I try to do is frame the stories in a context that people can relate to in their current lives. For instance, Elizabeth Taylor, that story took place. She was convalescing in isolation after almost dying from pneumonia, and I did it during COVID when I premiered the show. So we were all in isolation, we were all alone, and what the things you think about when you're forced to be alone in a room and you reflect on your life. And so that kind of really happened at a great time for people to be able to relate, if you can relate to Elizabeth Taylor. Like what do you do after a health crisis happens, and how you assess your impact in the world. With Anne's story, that takes place, we're seeing a similar moment right now in Hollywood. It takes place in 1970 during the MGM studio auction and the collapse of the studio system, when everyone's leaving Hollywood in droves, people are losing their jobs, and they're wondering what is the future of the entertainment industry. We're in a similar moment right now of with the streaming having taken over and production has been leaving LA, people in the industry are wondering what's next. So I'm trying to frame it that way. And also, you also get to learn about a really cool person and really cool songs that you might have heard, and you get to just have a good time. So it's not an accident that you happen to learn about a wonderful person's story, but it's a great byproduct if you're looking for a great night of entertainment.
Good. That's great.
Frank, how about you? Is Groucho still in the zeitgeist? I mean, he was so popular with young people in the 70s, but do young people still know Groucho today?
Not, I mean, truthfully, not as much. And I've always said about this show, it works whether you know him or not. You don't have to know who Groucho Marx is to appreciate the show I do, which has become more audience interactive and more crowd working and more improv based as it's evolved over the years. When I first did this show 40 years ago, I think I ad-libbed 2 or 3 lines. Now about a third of the show is improvised, or at least has the illusion of original improv. But you know, that's part of the joy of doing it. I feel like some of the work I've done is perhaps contributed to some of his longevity, but his movies will never go away. You know, you can go on YouTube and watch him on You Bet Your Life. He's written about constantly. You know, there are articles on him still. Books come out on the Marx Brothers, documentaries. He's still present, not the way it was when I was a kid. And I think good is good. A good story is a good story. A solid theatrical piece is a solid theatrical piece. People are going to show up if it's. And this show has a bit of a pedigree, but I think you're dealing with an interesting character in history. And I do realize that in 20 years, I hope I'm still doing this, that people aren't going to know. My peers will remember him, but I don't think it'll matter. I see my kids are in their 20s and they come with their friends and they're tickled by this. They love the irreverence like I did when I was their age. There's something eternal about his artistry and his attack and approach and irreverence. As you know, you're a fan. I finally come to accept that it's okay that it's not 1933 or 55 or 75. This is where we are. And I feel like I'm making I'm sitting here, Michael, and I'm looking, this phone is being balanced on Groucho Marx's encyclopedia from 1935. I have 200 plus letters upstairs in my closet that he wrote to his daughter that were bequeathed to me. And I'm thinking, while this is going on, I've got to go to the Huntington Library and I'm going to donate. This is part of legacy and legacy building. And I get to be part of that, of perpetuating this brilliant talent. And I feel like, as Klea was saying, that's important. And you are perpetual. I feel like, I can't tell you, I wish I'd saved them all, the thousands of notes. That's a thank you. I needed this. I miss it. I needed to laugh. Or better yet, I've never seen Groucho Marx before, and I want to go see a movie or read a book that he wrote. Or that to me is everything. It changed my life, and I see that in a way. This is a continuation. And I've had people come to me who've said to me, young people said, I went into clowning because I saw your show. I wanted to be an actor because I saw your show. That's satisfying. You don't like to talk about those things, but that's part of it. It's nice that I don't do it because of that. It's a wonderful byproduct of sharing this legacy, which I think is not going to go anywhere. I'll be long gone, and someone else will be. People can still see Duck Soup, and we'll laugh hysterically.
Yeah.
Pam or Donna, did you have a question for our guests?
I guess well, first of all, I just think you're so brave. I mean, I have anxiety just thinking about what you're doing. But that's me. I'm wondering, how much feedback do you get from others while you're developing these shows? Like, do you rely on a lot of other people, or is it something where you rely on your own instincts?
Well, in my case, if I may jump in again, I had my show has evolved over years, and I'm trying to keep it current. You got to watch, trends change, points of view change, and Groucho Marx was certainly a certain kind of character, and I've had to lean on other parts of his humor. I'm not going to be eyebrowing the whole time, because there was a great deal to his persona beyond, that, and which is part of human nature for males and females to be interested in the opposite sex or the same sex. But I have a director, a partner of mine for 15 years, Drea Weber, who will say, Frank, tell the story. What was Groucho passionate about? And so we continue to cut and paste and add and keep it current and connect with an audience in 2025. Try to make it smarter. There are we added a Gilbert and Sullivan song because he loved Gilbert and Sullivan, Titwillow. We added a story about T.S. Eliot, who was a friend and correspondent of his. That was not in the original version, but I had a smart person saying, this is a very good show. It could be better. So in my case, I have someone who's got their eyes on it, a very strong female theatrical talent who I often rely on for feedback. So, and there are friends who say, I missed that, or even fans will say, I missed that joke. Could you put that joke in, or that story? I missed it. There's so many. Anyway, it's a great question, but I try to keep it alive and current and moving. I never want to sit on it, because my joy. Before I go on stage, I say, share the joy. I'm in the audience. I enter as Frank at the top of the show and become Groucho. And as I'm sitting there during the overture, I say, share the joy that you felt, Frank, when you were 9 and were exhilarated by this magic, by this spectacular beast of a comedian.
Donna, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I can't get my microphone.
Oh, your microphone's on. We can hear you.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. What's your question, Donna?
Well, Klea is putting to, I'm sorry, not Klea. Kayla is putting together your show about Ann Miller. That has to be a very expensive undertaking. And how do you go about financing that or getting people to help you with that?
Well, that's a great practical question, Donna. Thank you for asking.
If that wasn't a setup for funding, nothing was.
No, yeah, it's really to date I've got a lot of support through grants, at least for Elizabeth Taylor, that project. This one I'm really self-financing through my own funds. I am doing some crowdfunding. I secured fiscal sponsorship through this entity called Producer Hub, and they're a nonprofit. And if anyone wants to contribute through the link on my website, it's a tax write-off. It's like you're giving to a nonprofit and the money ends up going to the project. So it's a great model for individual artists trying to get their work out there while letting people invest in the work and getting the benefits as they would donating to a nonprofit. So that's been my tactic this time around. But there are some grants out there for individual artists. Otherwise, you have to try to partner with a producer with deep pockets, or just try to find those angel investors that want to support the work. So yeah, that's really where the rubber hits the road in terms of doing these solo shows. That with doing a solo musical, we have found I'm using copyrighted music, so I have to pay an additional fee to use these songs, grand performance rights. So that's a budget line item that I did not have for the Elizabeth Taylor show, which was just a play. So musicals are definitely a little more of an investment than plays.
Very interesting. Yeah.
What a great point, though, because we are very reliant on angels, and just raising money for the PBS version of the show the Groucho show. It was one individual who funded it. It would never have happened. People think that PBS pays for it and you get a royalty, but we really are reliant often in these cases on those who love the theater and who have the resources.
And Frank, you're going to be back here in Chicago doing Groucho.
I am.
What's the date on that so people can come and see you, and where will you be?
Thank you. It's June 11th. It's at the Teatro Zinzani tent at the Cambria Hotel on Dearborn and Randolph, right in the theater district there. And we'll be celebrating my 40th anniversary doing the show. And it's a 2-act comedy with music and stories and one-liners and improv. And it's a great space. It's a historic tent, 100-year-old tent that it's in. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to returning. Now,
Klea, are you gonna? Well, yes. I mean, we're so excited to have you back in Chicago. Klea, are you going to be doing some of Ethel's work anytime soon?
I'm only holding this dog because when I put him down, he makes a ruckus. So I don't mean to appear quite as eccentric as I may appear. I just can't get him to shut up.
I thought you were doing a Paris Hilton one-woman show.
I know, exactly. Like, I go everywhere with my little yip. Well, I've been trying something. Again, my things are a little more, I don't really play the people. I have quite a few shows that sell. Like, I have a brand new Jerry Herman one that I'm really proud of. That's just me and the music of Jerry, and he did become like sort of a champion and friend of mine in his later years. But so I put these things together that are like concerts. And the Ethel Merman one is unquestionably the favorite. It's the only one anybody ever wants to book. That's the one. I said, but I have these other ones. They don't care. They want that Ethel Merman one, which I am not complaining. I love it. I love being sort of known for that and a champion of her work. But people they forget that, like, she's an overnight sensation in 1930. She doesn't sing like that 1970s version. That's much, much later. By the time I'm a kid tuning into her work, that's the end of this very long career. And so I'm happy to be a champion for like this, that thing didn't happen all along. That's like sort of a later function of what her voice became, But what was I going to say? Oh, so I've been doing something at a new club here in New York called Chelsea Table and Stage. And they've let me be doing something called the box set. And so I've done 5 of my shows from the last 20 years. And I do them periodically, like every month or so, putting up one of the old ones because they are scripted. I love that people think you just stand up and sing songs and tell stories. They're wildly scripted. I mean, the Merman one is script, like monologues. And I love holding myself accountable to them. I'm like, I've got to memorize that. It's like, you made it up. Nobody cares. They don't know, but that one will come back around in New York in November. And that's the one I feel confident saying it will sell out. That's the only one I feel confident saying that because she tends to be sort of still a magnetic character. The other thing I was going to say that was something Frank said, that people get tickled by, you use the word tickled by the lines and the material itself. I find that's true, especially if I can get young people there and into it, which I'm being successful lately. There's a very smart group of young college students right now. I just worked with in Florida, and another set I worked with in Nashville. Really great kids. But they become, for example, there's so much Cole Porter that is double entendre, right? These kids love it. They think it's so naughty. And I realize it's because everything in their world has they walk around with their pants down around their butt, so nothing has any nuance or clever like repartee. Suddenly the idea that corporal means it's a position in the army, but it's also means body. Suddenly they're getting these double entendre meanings, and they think it's so funny, and they they're tickled by it. And I'm like, this is so tame compared to everything you talk about and see, that getting that opportunity to go back and see how clever it was, how to be sensual or sexual or body, but in a clever way, is really a revelation to them, and they get tickled. So I wanted to get back to that word, Frank. That was.
I appreciate it, but what you just, if I may, just jump in for one more second here. What you're saying is, I say about 10 years ago, I played for 3 summers, around 2012, 13, 14, at ACT Theater in Seattle, and I noticed in the final run that there were college students, young couples on dates at my show about Groucho, and I thought, oh, something has caught on. The weekly papers, which play to the younger, hipper crowd, were endorsing the show. So the young crowd was coming up, and they loved the irreverence, the subversive nature of this character, the anti-establishment nature of the character. And I never thought I'd live to see that generation show up delighted.
Yeah.
With the thing. It was to me, it was extremely moving, and it was hopeful. And so I think people are going to keep discovering, and it takes these type of performances like Kayla's and yours and mine and so many others, I think, to keep this alive. And this is such a great, these are great American artists too. It's perpetuating a tradition. And these stories do get lost, and people don't know, and young people don't know, but they want to. My kids are in their 20s. They grew up with this stuff, and their friends are interested in live performance and storytelling. So there's always going to be a segment of the population that's going to dig this form that we're up to, I believe. If I may say dig 2025.
Kayla, we're workshopping the Ann Miller story, but it will be able for audiences to enjoy. Where can we come and see Shake It Away, the Ann Miller story?
Well, after we have our invited rehearsal at Porchlight on June 1st, the show will be going to Hollywood June 10th through the 15th as part of the Hollywood Fringe. And then it's coming to New York July 15th through 20th at 59 East 59th as part of their East to Edinburgh Festival. And then in August, we'll be at the Edinburgh Festival August 1st through the 9th for a 9-show rapid fire run in festival format.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's plans. You got plans.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Plans.
Well, I'm so glad that not only could we talk with you today, but that we can look forward to seeing you all in these performances coming up. I hope that everybody who is watching this does get an opportunity to see Frank and see Klea and see Kayla do this specific work. As I said, you're all brilliant stage actors, but there's something really unique about, I don't know, what is happened to you with identifying with these people. And as Klea, as you say, there's this responsibility kind of that's been bestowed on you to keep them out there, keep giving us the access to them even after they have gone. But something has happened with you all that you're able to to embody it. And it's a real gift for us.
Michael, thank you. I was going to say, just to dovetail off of what you're saying, Hal Holbrook, who's behind me right here, the greatest of all time with the solo shows, he said to me, Frank, keep it going, keep it going. And that's the theme here. That seems to be our mission, is to keep it going. So from him to us, hopefully this will be going for a long time.
Absolutely. Robin and Pam, thanks for being here with us today. Klea, Frank, and Kayla, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing the three of you on stage soon.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.